It's Tuesday, and if it's Tuesday at noon, it's the Maine Take. Hi, my name is Dana Connors. I'm pleased to be your host of this weekly program brought to you by the Maine State Chamber of Commerce. Now, after 13 weeks, you know what we're all about. It's our attempt, our hope to place a spotlight on issues important to our state and to showcase the people behind those issues. And boy, that is the case for today's program. We have two issues that are very important, that are very timely to share with you this week. The first is the race against racism in our nation and in our state, or perhaps better stated, the race for equity. Last Tuesday was an important day for either race. The verdict that was handed down by the jury that convicted Derek Chauvin of 4 counts of murder in the death of George Floyd was an important one. Here to give us his reaction to the verdict and to share his thoughts on moving forward in our race for equity will be Dajuan Eubanks, who president of the Red Claws basketball team, proudly stated right here in Maine. He will be followed by another important issue, an important person, that is Commissioner of the Department of Economic and Community Development, Heather Johnson. You probably have seen through the media today, or perhaps last evening, that there is a new effort underway for broadband expansion. It was the creation of the Maine Connectivity Authority. What does that mean for Maine? And how does that help the state find the answers to this most pressing issue facing our state? Well, let's begin with that race against racism. And I am pleased to introduce somebody who's become very important to us in the state, as well as the state chamber. That is Dajuan Eubanks. I mentioned he was president of the Red Claws. He's also a vice president for the Boston Celtics. And if you want to know anything about events or planning around sports, he's your guy. But I'm also proud to say that he is on our board of directors here at the state chamber and actually is co-chair of a committee that was established this year to help us better understand and to plot a course for improvement on diversity, equity, and inclusion. Dajuan, thank you very much. We know how busy you are, and the fact that you took time to be with us today, we are very, very grateful. Thank you for that.
Dana, thank you, and thank you for having me on the Maine Take.
It is an issue, a serious issue, an important issue facing our state and our nation. And my very first question is, what was your reaction when you heard the verdict last week concerning Derek Chauvin?
My reaction to the verdict last week was emotional. Being a Black man, and I'm 50 years old now, and I've seen my share of racism, whether it be against me or others within our community and within my family. And so when the verdict did come down the way it did last week, it was gratifying to for once see justice and equity and justice take place the way it should in that sense. And to your point, it was a big decision. It was a pivotal decision. And in short, what I've been saying is that it's a step in the right direction that provides hope and perhaps defines what we mean justice for all in America as well, too.
Yeah, I think it was fascinating to watch because you could almost tell that people were holding their breath, wondering what was it going to be this time? We hope we know what it's going to be. And when it finally came down, you could almost sense a real strong feeling of relief.
Mm-hmm.
And now it could be, and it was a historic moment, and it could be the beginning of something very positive, very good, and we hope that's the case. You've been in sports almost your entire life with the Harlem Globetrotters, with the Celtics. You've seen a number of states, a number of situations that deal with people of color. What was your experience here in Maine? When you came to Maine, did you feel like you were welcomed part of the community, or did you feel very similar to what might have been the case in other states?
I think it's a mixture of both, and in my particular case, I was fortunate to be able to marry into Maine. And so I was brought in through a family that existed here and that was pretty well known in Northern Maine. And so the fact that I was a former Harlem Globetrotter also preceded me coming into this state. And so it gave me an opportunity to come in with a softened approach in that way. And I think also, just personally as an individual, I travel so much around the world, coming in, I can pretty much go anywhere and survive. And so not necessarily would I say that I approached or I was faced with some of the adversity, but wherever I go as a Black man, I'm always going to be presented with adversity in that sense. And so it just kind of has become commonplace for me to deal with it in a manner, but I wouldn't say it was anything that was extreme for me at that point in time. And I feel like I may be fortunate in that way because of just the way I entered into the state. But once again, I mean, I've been here now for 15 years, 16 years, and Maine's a great place. The diversity is not as diverse as many other states in that way, but that still doesn't take away from the fact that there are good people here. And wherever you have good people, you're always going to have ignorant people as well, you know. And so whether it's Maine or anywhere else, you have your opportunity to face that. And it's all about how you respond to that in that way. And so I've always found myself in a manner, in a place where I'm always the first or the only one most of the time. And the way that you navigate that in that way is just by being truly who you are, you know, and dealing with the situation in real time. And so for me here in Maine, it's been a great place. I have not run into much adversity and racism, I would say. I mean, it exists, don't get me wrong, but, you know, it's all about the way you approach it and respond to it as well, too.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you are an extremely sought after person to help us better understand what we should do. And I remember when the chair and I reached out to you to ask you to serve on the board. And there was a teaching moment for me at that occasion. I know that you remember this. It was when I said very candidly, you know, there's a part of me that I'm almost afraid to ask that I'll say the wrong thing and unintentionally offend someone, or worse yet, hurt somebody's feelings when I don't really mean to. And your response was really one of those moments that was an eye opener. And you said, Dana, that's okay. But think what it's like for us, people of color. And to me, that was a statement worth 1,000 words, because we think of it from our point of view of being apprehensive, but put yourself in the other person's shoes and see what that must be like. Yeah, I certainly commend you for that. It was sincere, it was honest, and it was like I said, a teaching moment for me.
Yeah, and that's, you know, that's what this is all about, and that's how it's going to be overcome. And when I say it, racism, social injustice, systemic inequities that are in our society as a whole, I think you just have to, from a leadership position, be willing to listen and understand and provide an alternative perspective to things. And so it's very easy to become emotional and get defensive and, you know, have all of these biases come out in a way in which is not going to be productive to moving the ball forward. And I use that analogy, obviously being in basketball and everything, but you have to be willing to give in order to get, you know, and in order for us to really be able to eclipse the systemic racism that exists within our country, we have to start with the real fact of acknowledgement and everyone coming to the table to say, yes, it does exist. And once you're able to do that, then you're able to create common ground to provide solutions. And those solutions aren't always going to be rosy. It's going to be uncomfortable. It's going to be challenging in that way. But at the end, hopefully we'll all come out of it on the better side of it, in a better place where everyone feels like they belong in that sense. And that ultimately is the goal of, I think, the DEI work that's began more prevalently at large over the last year and a half since, you know, the incidents last summer, is that people are becoming more conscious. And although that consciousness was rooted in race from last summer, it goes much deeper into humanity. And that's what I like to say, is that it's all about just being human in that sense and respecting one another from that standpoint, versus allowing the color or ethnicity or disability or whatever it might be dictate and define how we engage with one another.
Yeah, because in reflecting on this program today, I read something that says that racism bears a cost for everyone. It's not just one-sided, it's for everyone. And I found that to be kind of a powerful statement. You led into a question that I wanted to explore, a point that I wanted to explore with you, and that had to do with our own efforts. You are co-chair of our diversity, equity, and inclusion, and you work with Mark Ellis on our staff. Share with our viewers what are we doing as a state chamber to address the issue?
Well, one, thank you for engaging with me regarding this. As you know, I posed some very challenging questions for you, as well as Cliff, and others that were on the phone call with me there. But I think from the standpoint of like the state chamber's positioning on DEI, one, I applaud you guys for taking the first step, and that's recognizing that DEI is something that needs to become more a part of our daily lens within the state when it comes to businesses, both large and small, throughout the state. And so, our efforts that we're doing on behalf of the state chamber is one in which we're taking it from you go slow to go fast, is what I'm saying. And I think most companies are recognizing this now, is that they're quick to do an external pledge as to here's what we're going to do and here's what we're going to be about before actually doing the work internally. And so from a state chamber standpoint, the committee, which is co-chaired by myself and Natalie Jones alongside of Mark Ellis, we're really starting to do a deep dive and put a strategy in place where we look internally first to really gain an understanding and common ground amongst those that are working on the committee, but also those full-time staff to understand completely what we're delving into, and what I mean by delving into is DEI work is a lot of work. It's a lot of heavy lifting in that as well too. And there's a lot of reality that comes out of that that's very uncomfortable sometimes. But in order to, like I said earlier, provide solution, we have to acknowledge our differences and our biases to be able to come to the same point in place, pursue this in a manner in which it's going to hopefully long-term eradicate it in essence. And so from a chamber perspective, for us, this first year is just really trying to understand the needs that are there, both internally first, but externally as well throughout the state, which, in the state of Maine, being the second widest state that's out there, we have to do a lot of due diligence around that. And, a lot of that is just educating, and educating people in the fact, the sense of like DEI does not just evolve around race because you see me at the front of it. It also involves gender, ethnicity, disability, and all the other things that go alongside of that as well. And so I think from a leadership position as a chamber, really being able to provide a different perspective around what DEI really entails provides the opportunity for us to begin to move the needle within the state as well too, so that there's no misunderstanding as to what truly is trying to take place here. And that's really making Maine a great place for all involved, not just a select few.
Well stated, my friend. It's an honor to have you on the board of directors, co-chairing the DEI. I can't think of a better person that would help lead us to where we want to be. So I take this occasion. I know you're very busy. Your time is sought after by many. We're grateful that you took time to spend with us today. Thank you, and I hope we do everything you want us to do to be better neighbors.
That's why you brought me on, Dana.
That's right.
Because I'm comfortable. We got to move the needle forward, and it's going to be uncomfortable sometimes. So thank you for having me here today, and I look forward to continue work with you.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Now let's turn our attention to another very important issue, and one that is very timely, considering the fact it was just yesterday afternoon, followed by news stories today about the significance of the latest development in the broadband expansion. And here to talk to us about that is, I will say, our friend and Commissioner Heather Johnson. If there's anything that anyone has to do with economic development in this state, you can be sure that Commissioner Johnson is going to be right in the middle of it. And we are so grateful for that. And your access is one of your many strengths. So we appreciate you being on. Let me just set it up in this way, because I think that there is significance, to be sure, in yesterday afternoon's announcement. We all know that broadband has become an issue on everyone's priority list, regardless of the sector or whether you're education, business, it's there. It's the number one issue. We also know that the value we saw in broadband was there before the pandemic, but the pandemic brought it front and center. We also know that its value is unquestionable regardless of what you did. We knew that the price tag was approaching $600 million to do it all at once. We had a start last year by virtue of the administration, the governor putting in $15 million and supplementing that. But all of a sudden, we find that there is money that's coming forward from the federal government. And yesterday's announcement about creating Maine's Connectivity Authority seems to offer promise in being able to use those dollars But you tell us, what does yesterday's announcement mean for the state?
We are really, or I guess I am, and the governor certainly is very excited about yesterday's announcement. It gives us a chance to really sit at the table with the private sector and with communities and craft projects that meet the need, short-term and long-term. Traditionally, right, we haven't had consistent funding streams that allowed us to think a little bit longer term about how these projects will really take shape from an affordability and an access perspective. We've looked at the infrastructure piece, which is one of the challenges, but we haven't either had the resources or the kind of ongoing mechanisms that would allow for creative solutions to think about how do we reduce overall costs, not just CapEx, but long-term OpEx, so that providers can offer affordable services to Maine residents and businesses. And so this new authority will give us a number of financial tools that will allow for those types of discussions. I mean, we are incredibly lucky in Maine, right? We have private sector providers that will come to the table and have those difficult discussions. They're willing and want to try to solve the same challenges that all of us want to try to solve. And so lots of states don't have that. I think sometimes we lose sight of some of Maine's advantages, right? And one of Maine's advantages in my mind is Maine companies come to the table to try to drive to good solutions for other Maine businesses and for Maine people. And so we have a luxury in that, and this authority will allow us to take that opportunity and put it to good use.
Heather, is it fair to say that this authority could be likened to what the Maine Turnpike Authority, how it's set up, it's appointed by the governor, and I guess in this instance also by leadership, and then they have their own distinct authority financially as well as decision-making otherwise?
Yeah, Dana, I think obviously your transportation background probably leads you there. We tried to pull the best out of the Maine Technology Institute statute, the best out of the Maine Turnpike Authority statute, and looked at a couple of other models across the country to develop this amendment in partnership, obviously, with Senator Bennett and Representative Berry, really to pull the best out of all of those pieces and take those learnings, right? Some of those have been around for decades, and that gives us real opportunity to say, okay, this is what worked in that statute. This is maybe where it applies to this work, pull that over. And so this is a compilation, basically, of statutes as well as a couple of creative pieces that will get us to where we need to go.
So they really are, I think you mentioned this, apologize for repeating it if you did, but I see them as the entity that takes the federal dollars and distributes it, either by grant, by loans. What happens, Connect Maine was always a part, in fact, you were there for a number of years and it's become a part of your department. Do they stay with you or do they go, and what is their role?
Yeah, I was there for 1 year, actually, Dan. It might have felt like dog years, but it was only one. Connect Maine is going to become a division of this authority. We'd like to have broadband housed in one place so that you can get highest and best use of the resources that you put together, right? Some of the mapping tools, some of the knowledge platforms, a look at kind of how funding, what's best use of funding should come from kind of a combined entity. And so Connect Maine's work is incredibly important and will continue. It will just move into that organization. Obviously, DECD and the administration will stay incredibly involved in these organizations as we do with MTI and other places. But it will, Connect Maine will stay as it is and just move into the authority.
Another feature I liked when I read about it, I'd love to have you comment on, is that it really didn't move, and you mentioned this earlier as well, you didn't move away from the private provider that's already providing service to the community or to the communities themselves who have taken up the responsibility in their own. As a matter of fact, they became part of the partnership in which this effort will pursue or complete their work. Yeah,
that's right. Experience and volume in this equation are really important pieces, as well as existing assets. So it's in all of our best interest to try to encourage providers or people that are already doing this work to do it more. and to kind of bring them to the table to make sure that we have effective solutions that work across the board, right? Private sector companies should have kind of a return on their investment, right? And they have certain rules and expectations that they have of their investments. State government or the new authority really is focused on social impact. And so as we bring those together, we have an opportunity to work on creative business models there for each project. Every project will look different because the needs are different. The infrastructure there is different. What leads to there is different. And so, this gives us the option to figure out kind of how those pieces fit together more effectively.
I misstated your term only because you were so effective in that 1 year. It just seemed like most people would take so much longer. How's that for response?
Sure, Dana, sure.
Oh, geez, you don't take me seriously. I was serious. So what's next? It's a bill that's been put before the committee. What's been the response to the publicity around it?
I think it's been pretty positive. Really finding a more strategic way to leverage this investment is hard to argue with. I think right now it becomes, all right, let's really get the processes down. Let's get the details down. Let's answer some of the questions on how. And so that work needs to start, and will start as early as this week. So we're going to run the process development work in parallel to the legislative process. We're going to be optimistic about what's going to happen in the legislature. Certainly we have bipartisan support at this point with Senator Bennett and Representative Berry as the Rural Broadband Caucus as kind of the co-sponsors. So we feel good about what's going to happen in the legislature, and we'll continue to work with them on that. In parallel, though, because timing is really of the essence, we're going to start building the processes we need in partnership with the private sector and communities and others to really have that ready to go, so that as federal funds become available, we will have done the due diligence work to be prepared to effectively leverage those.
Yeah, I would agree. The timing of this proposal, considering the fact that notwithstanding yours and the governor's leadership on this issue, 15 million plus almost 6 was a beginning, but trying to find those extra dollars was going to be a challenge. With the federal stepping up and knowing it's 129 million plus even more, you need a mechanism to be able to deliver and do it in a way that's coordinated, that's efficient and effective. And that's no small chore.
That's right. It isn't, but now's the right time, right? The funding looks like it's available now, and looks like there may be even some follow-on funding. We may be able to be having a totally different discussion 5 years from now about this, and maybe not even be having these discussions anymore, because it's just something we all take for granted, because, right, we are universally connected across the state, and everyone can be connected, right? It has to be very inclusive as we do this to make sure that everyone can have access. So that's the challenge before us right now, Dana, as a collective group and this new entity. And, I think we look forward to tackling that.
Yeah, and clearly an opportunity. Well, I thank you. I know that your schedule is very, very difficult to meet, and I appreciate you taking the time. This is a very important issue for our state, and I thank you for your leadership. And this is one that we'll be working with you on, as we have in the past. So thanks so much for being with us.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Thanks for making time for this discussion today, Dana. I think this is an important one to continue to keep in the forefront. And so we look forward to working with you as we move forward.
Thank you. Now let's turn our attention to another very positive person with a positive message. Of course, that's Peter Van Allen, editor of Mainebiz, that we welcome back every single week to give us the latest good news.
Dana, thanks so much. And boy, what a great discussion. Two really important topics, DEI and then broadband in Maine. Great guests. Appreciate you having me on. I wanted to bring up another topic, which I think is also a pressing topic in Maine, which is the housing crunch. And just in the past week, Mainebiz has reported home sales, existing home sales were up again last month. The median home price is now $256,000 statewide. In Cumberland County, home of Portland, It's now 380,000. That's the median home price. Wow. It's up 15% from a year ago. The statewide median price is up 14%. But now, I mean, we're talking that's the discussion around existing homes. Now, we had another story this week saying that one local town in southern Maine, Falmouth, has seen so much new construction now that Falmouth has had a 10% gain in its population. It's now hitting the cap for how many building permits it can do for the year, which they have a cap of 65 building permits that they're allowed to do. So, you know, we're starting to see, in addition to the fact that there aren't that many existing homes, we're now seeing that you're not going to be able to build that many homes either. And none of this, I should stress, even touches on the shortage of affordable housing. So yeah. that's kind of a lot of different information coming from different places, I realize, but it's a housing crunch.
Yeah, I mean, you do remind us of something that we see and hear a lot of, and people are talking about, and for some of our rural areas, it's been kind of a godsend in terms of helping those distressed areas where they exist. And many of us are thinking, well, maybe I should sell my home and reap the benefit, but I then can't afford to buy a new one because for the same reason. So yeah, it's good news, concerning news. You know, it's good news on behalf of the fact that the prices are rising, but a challenge for all the reasons that you said. But it certainly deserves attention. And thanks, Peter, for bringing it to ours. It's always
Dana,
great having you on the show.
Good conversations going on today. Appreciate it, Dana.
You're more than welcome. Thanks, Peter. Look forward to seeing you next week.
Thank you.
Now let's turn our attention to my advocacy team to talk about something that is at work in the legislature. I have two on today, I believe. Peter Gore, our executive VP, and Ben Gilman, who is our counsel. Linda is home recuperating from her second vaccination, our second shot, and not doing so well, but she'll be with us next time. You can count on it. She doesn't like to miss any opportunity to talk about her issues. So Pete, you want to kick it off? What's happening?
Sure, Dana. I think rather than, I know Ben has some specific bills. I think rather than talk about some of the issues that I've got this week, I think I just want to talk about the accelerated pace of the legislative session. Last week, the legislature made the decision, the presiding officers, to waive the public hearing notice that usually takes place. And we've been under the what they call the 1 week notice provision for a while. In other words, they'll give up to a week's notice of what's going to come up for public hearings and work sessions. But last week they waived that. So from here on out, we really don't know what's going to be coming up from day to day. And the legislature has printed above 1,600 bills now. And we're down to the deadlines of, May 7th for all committees to have everything that's currently in their possession out, and everything that's referred since that time to be out by, my understanding is May the 17th. So those are pretty narrow deadlines, and there's a lot of work to get done. And the presiding officers have also said to the committees, you can only carry over 10% of the bills that you've been assigned. So for the Labor Committee, for example, that's only 12 bills. I find it hard to believe they'll be able to stick to that, but we'll see what happens. But the message here is we're on an accelerated timeline. From week to week, we're not sure what we're going to be dealing with in terms of public hearings or work sessions. And they've left a lot of big issues out there to the end. And we haven't even started talking about, the federal relief monies and how that's going to be spent in the supplemental budget or anything else. So we have and they want to adjourn on time, by the way. They want to adjourn by the third week in June. So there's a lot of work to do in the interim. Ben, I'll hand it off to you.
Yeah, thanks, Peter. That accelerated timeline obviously impacts a lot of bills and legislation, but the most important bill we heard about earlier that's in the Energy and Utilities Committee this week is the one Commissioner Johnson talked about creating the Broadband Authority. So we've heard a lot about that, so I won't go into detail, but I want to say that probably is the most important bill that is happening in the environment and energy world this week. Another bill, though, I want to highlight is one that's had a public hearing early yesterday in the Environment and Natural Resources Committee, one dealing with mining here in the state of Maine. For those that are following mining, we've been working on mining in Maine and updating our regulations for the course of the last 5 legislative sessions going back 10 years. And I thought we've done a pretty good job at it and created a framework and an infrastructure that is very stringent and protects our environment, but does allow for some mining. There was a bill, though, heard before the committee that would ban all mining, metallic mining here in the state of Maine, which really goes against of all the work that we have been doing and we put forward. Now that there's a couple companies looking out there for some potential mining here in the state that could create some economic development in some rural areas that could benefit from that and do it in an environmentally sensitive fashion that is in the rules and the laws that we passed. People who hold up as a gold standard around the country and say, if you're going to do it, you're going to protect the environment. Look at what they did in Maine. Some would say they're too stringent, that they don't allow for mining. But now to have a bill come forward to ban the industry outright, that sends a really chilling effect to other industries around the country, that you can work for years and years and come to an agreement and get something in place that's workable, that protects the environment. And then the very next legislative session, you're finding a ban on your industry. So it's a bill concerning to us. It's LD 1163. Hopefully it doesn't move forward, but I wanted to highlight that one in contrast to the really good work going on with broadband and the new authority being proposed with all the money coming down from the federal level. The commissioner spoke about it, the 15 million from the bond last time, 120 million coming down from the feds. Now is the time for us to strike and to deal with the issue of developing broadband to all parts of the state of Maine. So those are the 2 issues I wanted to highlight this week. And I don't know if, Peter, there's a specific issue you want to talk about.
I think I'm just going to keep it big picture this week, Ben.
Yeah. And
Well,
then
thanks, guys.
I'll just say one last thing. If Linda was here and if she was feeling better, she'd want to talk about the Opportunity Maine tax credits that are in the taxation committee. And those are really important for the state in terms of attracting workforce here to our state. And I know she's been active on those bills and they are important. And want to make sure there's about a half a dozen bills dealing with tax credits and dealing with student debt.
You're right. You're right about all those points, guys. And thank you very much. We miss Linda, but we know she'll be back. As a matter of fact, she had to be really sick or she would be here today for sure. So thanks. Take care. For our takeaway this week, we've had 2 very important, timely issues. We begin with the first one, race against racism. That is an important issue. It's a very serious issue, and it's one that is difficult, as Dajuan said. It's sensitive for many of us to even talk about it to get to where we need to be. I've struggled with the fact, is that because we are one of the whitest states in the country, and sometimes we think that that doesn't affect us, it's not about us? Well, I think we know better than that. When you look around us, you realize that racism is amongst us. And sometimes, as we also discussed with Dajuan, and I gave my own personal experience, we're almost afraid to talk about it with people of color for fear of saying something wrong that we don't mean to be, or offending somebody when we don't want to. You wonder if it's because we don't know what we don't know, but we don't know also what we need to know. And I found an interesting, as I was thinking about this last night, I recalled an interesting quote that went like this, and it could well be the answer to the challenge. It goes like this: beyond right and wrong, there is a field. I'll meet you there. That field really means listening to one another and learning from one another. It requires us to look at this issue with open eyes, open ears, and an open heart. And maybe, as our parents used to remind us, treat others as you would want to be treated. Yeah, racism exists because I, not you, am silent. And that's something that we can't afford to be. Dajuan spoke of it in terms of being sure that we're aware of what's going around, how this impacts us, what it means, to acknowledge that we have a role, we have a responsibility. It's part of us. In action, what do we do to make a difference? What can we do that help us bring people together? Yeah, it's about awareness, acceptability, and action. And this past week, the race for equity took a significant first step. Last Tuesday, and a historic verdict, as it has been described, was laid down by the jury in convicting Derek Chauvin for the crime against George Floyd. The Attorney General said that it wasn't justice, but it was accountability. And that's the first step towards justice. There is so much more that we can do. There is so much more that we must do, because we all know that we can do it, we can do better. Because at the end of the day, racism bears a price that affects everyone. And for broadband, also an extremely important issue that we know affects our economy, it affects our health, it affects education. And in today's announcement by the governor, as you heard Commissioner Johnson say, is a step towards that. We know that broadband is clearly laid out as a primary incentive contained within the state strategic plan. It's a key investment. We also know that pandemic brought it front and center. It was no longer a luxury, if that's the word, it was a necessity for all the reasons that we mentioned. And funds that were once scarce and hard to come by have been made pretty plentiful by the federal government. Senator King, with his 120 million additional money coming from the rescue plan or for the infrastructure plan, there are monies, but how do we put that to work? How do we implement it? Well, the governor's proposal in a bipartisan way was to create this Maine Connectivity Authority to do just that. It was a pathway forward to fulfill a promise of providing broadband service to those underserved and unserved. It was to do it in concert with, as a partnership with, our communities and our private providers. That's how we need to get the job done. It's not, as they said, nice to have anymore. It's a necessity to have at speeds that accommodate the needs of business, of individuals, of associations. You know, the theme that seems to be emerging as we reflect on some of the programs of late seem to be centered around three words in their meetings: economy, the environment, and equity. The economy by way of growing our economy, using the strategic plan, economic resource recovery recommendations. Environment, the governor's climate action plan that Maine won't work. I said that last week too, Maine won't wait. And lastly, and certainly today's focus, and one that will stay with us until we get our arms completely around it and treat each other as we want to be treated, is that of equity. It's a great opportunity in all three of those areas. It's before us today. Let's take advantage. We owe it to ourselves and we owe it to each other. That's Maine Take for this week. We look forward to seeing you right back here when we're going to take a look at Teacher Appreciation Week and show our gratitude for those who do God's work for our children. With that, I thank you. I hope you take care of yourself and to take care of one another. I thank our sponsors. I thank all of you. And I look forward to seeing you right back here, same time next week on Tuesday at 12 o'clock. Take care. Have a great week. Bye-bye.